Hello, everyone. This is another episode, and again, hopefully, what will be a continuous conversation with people who are doing interesting things. Real quick, and I didn't really get into this too much on the first one, but just as I go on, I'm kind of fine tuning the conversation and the topics of conversation. But more than that, what I wanted to bring across was the fact that there are a plethora of shows out there that talk about how Joe Schmo Millionaire is now doing well, not Joe Schmo, but X millionaire is doing really really well, and it makes it seem that he or she can take all the risks in the world because obviously they're a millionaire, billionaire, or whatever it is. So it's kind of hard for people, myself included, to resonate with that, and because the idea being that okay, I'm sure a millionaire can do whatever he or she wants because they've got a huge net. So what I'm more trying to focus on is not so much the people who have money or the people who have everything that they possibly wanted, but the people who are trying to get there, whether it's financially, whether it's with social projects, whether it's a combination thereof, whether it's just experiences in life. And these people are us, everybody. They're the everyman or every woman for that matter. And these are people that I want to focus on, and these are why I'm trying to get as much of an array of people as I can get to talk about what makes them them. Um, so in this episode, I've got a good friend of mine he's coming to us from LA, but he's been all over the place. I met him in LA many years ago. His name is Zeke. I'll have him introduce himself in a second. But he's doing a lot of things, and I say that because I always butcher his last name. But he's been a boy of mine for a decade or so. He's been traveling around the world doing a lot of soul searching slash helping slash guiding his path, and we're going to talk to more about that in general. So with that, I'm going to bring over Zeke. So real quick, Zeke, you're on camera now. What's going on?
All right, we're here finally.
So Zeke and I've been trying to get this going for a while, and so and he's got a project he's going to talk about that is kind of what one of the genesis of this whole idea came from. Like he and I were having, walking around and having breakfast, and this conversation came up and has led to this. So real quick, let Zeke introduce himself and what he's working on in a broad scope, and we'll get more specific about it.
All right. Again, for the record, my last name is Covarrubias. I know that you butcher it quite a few
Now you
times,
know
but
why.
most everybody does. But yeah, as you were saying, the project itself that we were kind of discussing is something I've been seeing in a lot of my travels, and it's this need for people to be able to express themselves, however they want without all of this judgment that's going on or really having to curate what they're saying or edit what they're saying, or how they express themselves in art. There's a lot of fear out there about judgment or quality that's assigned to whether it's an art form, a project, your job, your income. There's just this rating that goes on with everything, and I think it's stifling. It's just very suffocating for a lot of people. And what I decided to do was create this website that it's called thebattlingkitten.org, and it's for basically to celebrate random acts of kindness through art. So what I mean is it's for people of all types that if they feel inspired to tell a story, whether that's through writing, through painting, through photography, whatever it is, in their day-to-day travels, if they see some kind of random act of kindness or they feel inspired by somebody's, story that they've came across, maybe they want to tell a story about that person or about that situation. And this website was created to display that for them. And this isn't for, artists or people who particularly do that for a living, somebody who fancies themselves a writer or a photographer or something like that, or a movie maker. It's for everybody that has to tell a story and to get something out. And, I'm trying to cultivate an environment to where they feel they can display this work without, any kind of judgment. The reality is it coming out honestly? Were you inspired by the situation? And, you're going to find support here for that. So I think that's, one of the biggest things right there. And in addition to that, to serve really as a hub to bring people together to just have more discussion with like-minded people as far as, you know, as an adult, I think we lose some of that, time, desire to continue to create things, whether that's art, music, whatever it may be, because it's difficult, I think, in society these days with how much you have to work and all the other responsibilities that come out of that. And with this, it's about cultivating an environment to bring people back in, to let them know that, hey, this is a place where you can discuss ideas, you can create things. There really isn't any kind of measurement or quality about it. It's just more about expression is the biggest thing. So, and then from there, there's the third component where we're bringing people together to work on actual charity projects like the documentary that I'm filming on child trauma and social conditioning and some other aspects to that as well. But
Let's pause right there real quick, and we'll get back to the specifics related to the documentary, because I know there's more there that we want to delve into. But real quick, just give people a quick background of exactly of who you are and where you come from. Obviously, mentioned you're in California, but born, raised, schooling, etc. Like, give me a quick little synopsis of where Zeke comes from.
Yeah, I was born and raised actually in Modesto, California. It's a Central Valley. I'm there right now. It's about an hour and a half from San Francisco. I moved down to Southern California when I was around, 22 or so. So it was a good 15 years ago, and I was there the majority of the time before I left earlier this year to Europe. But so I've actually been coming back home now to, start doing some more filming because, where I grew up has really shaped a lot of where, all of this desire to address these kind of subjects is coming from, because Modesto is typically on the top list as far as most difficult cities in the entire country as far as crime, violence, health, things like that. So Modesto, Stockton, California, they're all pretty bad, pretty rough spots to grow up in. And when you come from that kind of environment, and if you're lucky enough to make it out, it's kind of been inspiring to be able to want to give back and try to find a way for people to have a different outlet. But that's really where I came from before moving down to Southern California, and
So,
then now I'm in the place.
and Zeke and I had met in SoCal years and years and years ago, through mutual friends, and have since become friends, obviously. And he was in New York last week or so, but we've kind of crossed paths because I was traveling and vice versa. But more than that, he was in Europe for a little bit. Now he's back in general. But more so, before I move on to current Zeke, I'm curious to understand what makes Zeke Zeke, and by that I mean the idea of giving back and the idea of trying to do something with this website that you have, which I'll post a link on there. People will find it. It'll both be in the credits and underneath the title of his name exactly. You'll see the website again, and I'll constantly promote it throughout this video blog just so people can have access to it. But with that being said, you come from an area that you mentioned, Modesto, being a difficult area to come from by way of crime, etc. Now, I'm blatantly ignorant to the plight of Modesto or what happens there. But is this racial? Is this financial? Is it a combination? What makes this area crime ridden versus Manhattan Beach? Well, that's obvious. But what makes
Yeah.
it more dangerous than New York, for example? Like why does Modesto have the crime it does, for example, in your view?
I get that question quite a bit, and basically based on my experience and the research I've done with it, the problem is a lot of the various drug trades, meth, cocaine, marijuana, especially in the last decade before marijuana slowly getting more legalized, but meth is a big one too. A lot of the drug trade runs through Central California, so starting at the north from Redding, going through Stockton, Modesto, Fresno, Visalia, and you have these medium-sized towns like Modesto that are, say, 300,000 people, similar to, say, Fresno. But there's a lot of rural area on the outside, and that's where a lot of the drug activity ends up happening, and that bleeds into the city. The other thing is there's not a lot of economic opportunity as well. So I think that makes it difficult for people to get ahead or even make a reasonable living to get ahead. So when that happens, I think it affects the person that's growing up here, because it's so difficult to get ahead when there's no opportunity, and you start looking for other opportunities. And you generally tend to be a little bit more angry when you can't get anywhere and there's no opportunity, and you see that played out. So I think there's a little more. You find a little more chip on the shoulder, around these parts typically, but a lot of it has to do with the drug trade that's kind of went through here, and there's just a lower amount of education. A lot of the schools certainly aren't, on the top end of the education system. All these things really end up feeding each other. And a lot of the smaller businesses that are here have been owned, like a lot of smaller mid-sized towns, by a lot of the same families for quite a long time. So what ends up happening is you just have a lot of nepotism. Things get passed down, and it creates a really difficult barrier to entry to get anywhere. And when you get stuck in that kind of cycle, it's very difficult to break. And I knew that myself, or felt that myself growing up around a lot of drugs, alcohol. You get a lot of violence and stuff that comes with that, and it's difficult to break through, because even when you do want to get out and do more, you almost have this sense of the other people around you kind of knocking that down as well. Mostly maybe because they're mad at what their situation is, or I'm sure there's all kinds of reasons for it. But the reality is, when you're trying to break through, it's not necessarily a very supportive environment, and that makes it difficult. But I would chalk it up to those things
So
mostly.
then, so you grew up in this situation. You leave Modesto, then you move on to Southern California.
Mm.
At what age?
I was 21 when I went down there, had no college, barely made it through high school. But all I knew is I wanted to get out of here at this time. And my older brother was actually in the military. He was in the Marine Corps down there, and he went through Camp Pendleton, which is, right there by San Diego. And yeah, I went down there to visit him at different times with my other older brother as well. And we would go down there from time to time, and it just felt like all things were possible down there, versus here. People weren't so angry. There was more opportunity. There was just a lot more socially going on, and of course the beach and everything's nice as well. But eventually, I made the leap down there when I was 21. But it was a difficult move to make, not having any resources, no education. But slowly through some network, and I'd be able to starting to find my way, and
So
kind of
then,
build on that.
so you go to California. You eventually end up Southern California. Sorry, end up meeting a collection of people, and through various meetings, et cetera, you manage to find yourself a decent career, to find
Yeah.
yourself a situation that's afforded you the opportunities you currently have. But
Hmm.
to get there, you were in California for about a decade or so, yeah? Like how long were you there? More than
Yeah,
that.
I was in Southern California for a good, 13 or 14 years before I ever even, left, which was this past year, off to Europe. So I was there for quite a long time, and not really by choice, to be honest. There came a point where I was building and working on restaurants, and owned a coffee shop, an organic coffee shop with a friend of mine there in Tustin in Orange County. And when you get into these kind of projects like restaurants, they're very time consuming, they're very capital intensive, they take a long time to get going. And eventually, if you do want to get out, it takes a long time to wind down. And before you know it, and I think anybody who works a lot can relate to this, the weeks start flying by, months start flying by, and before you know it, the years are flying by. And it just really drained me, emotionally, financially, everything. But I learned quite a bit from it, about my own personality and the desire to, really be mobile and be able to, travel and not stay stationary. So I had a great time, in Southern California, but I definitely felt like I stayed, longer than I wanted to. But which was, really my own fault, because I put myself in that position.
Well, I mean, that's not a bad thing one way or the other. Obviously, because experience is experience. But
Yeah, definitely.
going back to the coffee shop thing that you mentioned, right? You had an organic coffee shop. You don't have
Mhm.
anymore, right? This is something you
No, no, I sold out of that quite a while ago. Geez, it's
yeah.
got to have been a good 4 years right now. My good friend Bodie, he still has it there in Tustin, and they're doing well.
What's it called, by the way? Just for
It's called the Lost Bean.
the Lost Bean. That's
Organic
right.
coffee.
Now, I
Yep.
unfortunately never made it down there because I'm not a good supporter of Friends, apparently. But it's what. what I want to get in about that, it's an organic coffee shop, right? Now, if I was to open an organic coffee shop, I would do so maybe because there was no organic coffee shop in the area, not for the means of providing an organic coffee shop, but the means of providing something different for capital
Right.
gains.
Yeah.
Your reason, I believe, was because you truly embraced the organic lifestyle. Now, this is me speaking for you, so please correct if I'm wrong. Or is this a capital means or both?
Actually, it didn't work out that way, and that's a good point that you bring up because I think with as you know, people meet you now, they kind of get a snapshot of where you're at, and I do a lot of activism with environmental in organic food sources and local buying and all that stuff. I certainly didn't grow up that way, and it's not something that just I've kind of grown up with that mentality. It was because of the coffee shop itself. Before coming into that, I feel like I was like so many other people. I didn't pay attention to any of this. Food was food. You're going about your business. Where it comes from, whatever. But it was my business partner Bodie that was leading, that kind of lifestyle beforehand, and I started to begin to be educated through him, about the importance of organics, what it was doing to the environment, and supporting small farmers, and all the various things that come with it. It really became because of him. And the more I started to learn about it and see the damage of larger food companies and what farming does, or I should say large corporate farming does to the land, the people around it, even people who are miles away from it, that get the fallout from it. I think the more you become educated, it was very easy to start to switch and start to learn more about it because you see the kind of damage that was there. So by no means did I grow up in an environment where it was something that was ever even talked about before I had met, or before my business partner at the time was really educated me about it, which I'm really thankful for because it led me on a whole different path afterwards. But it was his idea to make it organic, which nobody was doing at the time. This was like 2006. So, using recycled materials, cups, all these things, there was very little of that around at the time. And there was no organic coffee shops anywhere near there.
See, I asked because that's just a very, now it's commonplace. Now there's
It
organic thing
is, yeah.
everywhere, right? And I grew up in a situation, like I grew up in Jamaica. So growing up in Jamaica, I mean, by default, a lot of things were organic just because,
Right.
I mean, again, I'm going this, by the way, I'm assuming that just because I figure who's putting more cost into something. And we
Yeah.
didn't have the giant, lovely fruits. We had great stuff, but it wasn't like you had the abundance of variety
Mm,
you have in the States where there's 12 kinds of apples and whatever, whatever. Now we get a
right.
lot of stuff from the States, but with that being said, it wasn't something that was even a concept or a thought process to me. And even to this day, I'm more price conscious than I am organic conscious, but that's just
Right.
me. That's neither here nor there. But
Right.
when you come from a situation like you did, when you mentioned an area where um, it was rough, for lack of a better word,
Yeah.
right? Organic versus non-organic isn't really the thought process, but more so than
No.
that, it's
No.
cost versus benefit, right?
It's
Like how
co
much
it's
more can I
cost.
get, right? And that's why I was
It's
going there. I didn't know where your mindset. So you came in with a quote unquote traditional mindset, one like
Yeah.
myself or anybody else.
Yeah.
And from arts, not now, kids nowadays have a different kind of thing, but and then you moved on to LA, and you become a part of this organic
Mm,
situation. You start learning about organic foods, etc.
mm,
For the people as well, Zeke is also a non-smoker, non-drinker, never has been, and so on. This was
mm.
obviously fostered, I'm assuming, from youth versus the organic situation. But why those
Yeah. That,
choices as well? Was that
yeah.
financial? Was that I care about my body? Was that um, I just don't need it? I'm confident enough. Like, what was the logic behind? Because I mean, a lot of people, I mean, by default, drinking alcohol, because I do myself, is it's so commonplace. It's more
Yeah. It
socially
is.
normal than it is, than for people who aren't. So why go that route?
Yeah. It's certainly common. And truth be told, I mean, I've never even dated a girl that doesn't drink, to be honest with you. It is very common. And for me, I wish I had a huge epic story for it, but the reality of what shook out is, when I was younger, it was just really being stubborn and not wanting to be like everybody else that I had, grew up around. I felt like they were causing me so many problems. There was just, always so much arguing going on, and so many issues everywhere. I just didn't want to be like them was the biggest thing. So for me, I just, well, I'm not going to drink. I'm not, going to smoke or do anything else. It was really just because of that. And then once I got into high school, same kind of thing. You have all this, everybody, starting to drink, and, you have that whole high school dynamic there. But even then, I was in sports and running track at the time, and I just didn't want to be a part of it, more just because I wanted to be different. It wasn't really because of anything else as far as health wise and stuff. I mean, yeah, those were nice byproducts of it, but I don't want to sit here and act like it was because of that. I was just being stubborn and wanted to be different. And I felt like that was just something that was mine because there wasn't much else that was mine. So,
I can
and
understand
then
that.
as I got older, it just, one year led to another, and, it just never ended up, kind of happening. And now at this point, I don't really have any good reason to not drink at this point. I just don't end up doing it. And if I feel inspired to one day or another, maybe I will, but.
Yeah, no, I mean, I can support that cause. I didn't drink till I was 20,
Hmm.
which I thought was a great little holdout.
Hmm.
Very proud of myself, pat myself on the back.
Hmm.
But it was nothing beyond the fact that for me it was cost. Where I was like,
Hmm.
hey, if I'm gonna go out and drink, that's gonna cost me $20 that I could use on something else, kind of thing, right? So for me, it was purely cost.
Yeah.
Which is why I was curious to know what your logic was, right? And also
Yeah.
the byproduct of being different and not being that guy worked out to some level. Except then I became the guy who doesn't drink and is too good or whatever. Like it goes because the people assume if you're not doing the norm stuff, then you're way too off to one extreme or the other. Versus
Yeah, I
I
get
just don't
that a
want to.
lot.
You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? And I
Yeah, I
figure,
had that happen
yeah.
too.
So inevitably, I caved and you did not. So props to you. Um, so in any event, life transpires. We move on. We're now. You did the coffee stuff. That didn't. That went well for the time being. You learned from it. You moved on. Um, and then you end up traveling the world as of a year ago,
Hmm.
working in various countries. I think you were in Spain, France. You were here in New York for a little bit. I think you're going to Mexico, if I'm not mistaken, in a couple
Yeah, I'll be
weeks or
there
whatever.
next week.
There you
Yeah.
go. And obviously working from all these remote locations. But more so than that, the question becomes: in all these travels now, you've seen things that I'm assuming, had only seen on TV or the news or read on the internet. Now you're actually getting to experience a lot of the cultural things that you hadn't in the
Hmm.
past. Um, was that the genesis or the catalyst? I'm sorry, more for your idea for your website, for your organization, or where did that come from? Like, why the desire to give back? Why the desire to? I mean, you've gotten out, you're doing your own thing, you help your family. I get that, but why the desire to do more than that?
I get that question a lot as well. And, you know, I think, it would be, I wouldn't want to sit here and describe it as, I'm trying to be some kind of, world saver or world changer. It's actually not about that for me. It's more about expression. And, a couple years back, it was around 2 years ago now, especially after the coffee shop, everything that was happening in my life, I really hit rock bottom, financially, emotionally, it was a really rough time, and especially feeling like being at the age that I was, sleeping on a friend's couch. All these things were difficult to swallow. But I came to a point to where, I said, I'm going to stop measuring everything that I'm doing, and really start getting back to being, who I really am. I'm just going to let that out wherever it takes me. I'm tired of caring about what I'm supposed to do, what anybody thinks. I just want to be, me, and that's it. And that led to, at different times, what do I feel inspired by? And that's what I work on. So that led to this, project. I started writing about these particular subjects, like child trauma, social biology, and anthropology, and these, kind of related subjects. And at the time, because I was trying to work through my own problems, to get to where I was in a peaceful place. And as I started to work through these things, I was thankful enough to come across some good, writings, or some good, books, and the words really spoke to me. Um, and from there, I felt like, for me, working through these things, I just felt inspired to kind of, repackage some of these subjects or retell this story to people that are may have grown up with a similar background, because as I'm sure you've probably read, and many people have, sometimes some teachers or some books speak to you and some don't, depending on what your background is, how you write it, and all those various things. But for me, I felt like, well, how can I, rework this stuff to, you know, for me to work through it, but also for people with similar backgrounds to really be able to relate to it. And when I was working on these things, it was just as simple as, I wake up each day and I felt like working on it. So I just continued to do it. It wasn't something that I had to force. It wasn't for, trying to, change the world per se. It was more about, this is what interests me. This is what's inspiring me. I enjoyed, writing about it, and that's it. So it really comes down to that, is what's inspiring me right now, and I'm going to work on that wherever that takes me, whether it's a website, whether you're working on a movie, whether you're just writing, because I'll write, short stories about, different people that I come across. It's wherever that inspiration comes from. That's what it is. That it happens to come out this way is more just a byproduct of everything more than anything. So I kind of want to be clear about that. It's not a mission per se, as much as I think maybe other charities, might be. It's coming more from a place of, this is just what's inspiring me right
All
now.
right. So then, simply put, the name thebattlingkitten.org.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I, I don't even get. Enlighten me. Why? I
Uh,
know you got an affinity for cats, and with your shirt included, and you can show the people
oh
your
yeah, is
shirt a
that
little
great
bit
or
more.
what?
It's something. I'll give you
Just
that. Oh, it's a
astronauts.
bunch of cats. I thought it was three. It's a whole bunch of cats. All right.
The whole gaggle of
I'm
cats.
judging you even more right now, but all right, continue with the,
Okay.
why the battling kitten?
This is another example of, not a great story behind it. My brother had this screen name, called the Battling Bunny Corp, Battling Bunny Corporation. For some reason, it just made me laugh. It was funny. And so I,
This is what, video
changed
game
it.
screen name and stuff like that, or
No,
just
he
like
just had it like
AIM? Like, what was this?
yeah, like on
Yeah,
on
is
AIM
it?
or G Talk,
Yeah, like that kind of
Google
stuff.
here. And I don't know, for some reason it just made me laugh. So and since I like cats, I like all kinds of animals, but I just thought it would be funny. So I just changed it to, the
Battling
battling
kitten.
kitten and then
All right.
.org, but it's not, we're not specifically saving cats
I
or
was gonna say,
anything.
all right.
And his
Um,
name was just because I thought it was funny at the time, and then that's where it started. And again, it was just an expression at the time. I didn't think it would end up where it would here. I didn't have any ideas of where it was going to go. It was just, I'm going to work on whatever I feel like today. It's going to go where it goes.
got it.
And then now we're here today, which a lot of that, changed and kind of morphed as I was going through Europe and stuff.
Awesome.
But
All right.
yeah, that's where the name came from.
So this is not. I mean, you have a primary occupation, which is what you've been doing when you're traveling around, and what you'll be doing in Mexico and everywhere else for that matter. And obviously, your occupation allows you to work remotely. What
Thank.
with the yeah, right, that works out well. With the battling kitten scenario, however, um, is that, like, where does that rank in your life by way of, like, I'll put it this way, on percentage of time spent on Zeke exploring life, which is everything from relationships, etc., to
Mhm.
work to the battling kitten? Or am I
Mhm.
missing some other piece of the pie? Like, what are the things
No,
that make up your life, and what percentages?
I would say that's, most of it. It's hard to put into, in a percentage, because you kind of ebb and flow through these things. But it's a pretty substantial part of my life. But again, not because I'm trying to get to some particular goal through it. It's just I find these things interesting, so I kind of go with it. But I don't work on it on a daily basis either. I would say probably 3 days a week, 4 days a week, something like that.
Okay.
And then as far as work goes, I don't think I've worked a full 8 hours for a while. Probably should be more diligent, but it's just not a it's not a priority. Even though I love what I do, we my friend and I own a mortgage relief company, so we help people that are losing their homes, get back on track. But and I enjoy that as well, but it's not, I like to keep a good balance, of everything. And I also like to, as my brother says, leave something in the well. I don't like to exhaust anything to the point to where you're tired of it. I think it's good to miss things. So same with work, and, same with these projects that I work on, or the battling kit. And, I don't work on anything to where I'm just exhausted in my, eyeballs are popping out of my head, unless I'm editing some kind of video, which I just started, doing. That's a whole nother
Yeah, no, that's gonna take
rabbit
a little
hole. And
bit.
that caused me to stay up pretty late last week trying to edit a 3-minute video. That was a whole different thing I was not prepared for, learning. And, sometimes you go down those rabbit holes, but it's fun too at the same time. But I try to keep a good, balance. And of course, the rest of the time you want to be social and get out there and explore. I think exploring, and getting out in the world is probably the biggest part, or what I enjoy the most, because that's where you meet people. That's where you find the stories. That's where the inspiration comes from. And,
Now,
you kind of tell yourself that.
well, all right. When you say exploring, what's exploring for you? And the reason I ask the question is a lot of people I know who travel, and when they travel, they want to do every touristy sightseeing spot you could imagine, right? Then there's other people who just want to go to the clubs and the bars, and then there's people who go on food adventures, if you will. Then there are people who go run, one with the earth and camp and all that kind of business and stuff like
Mhm.
that. Like when you say exploring, like are you trying to? How much of the culture are you trying to soak in the places you're in, and how do you go about doing that?
To be honest, at this point, I try not to overthink it too much. What I'll do is I'll book a place that I'm going to, for example, Guadalajara, Mexico next week. Yeah, I've always heard great things about it, so I figure I'm going to go. I booked a plane ticket. I'm going with my older brother. We didn't set any agenda. Usually what I'll do is fly in, drop in, you check into your place. We might look up a few sites online and we just start winging it. Um, and that's it. I just start to walk and see the city. Mainly, I walk everywhere, like all through Europe, Spain, Italy, France. I mean, I probably walked an average of 3 to 5 miles a day, and on a really good day, probably who knows 8, 10 miles, pretty easy, just all over the place, all day long. Mainly just walking, going to different restaurants, and if you meet people, you go to different places, or if you know people in those cities, yeah, you might go out to dinner and stuff like that. I wouldn't say not really anything to do with bars or clubs or anything, but I like to do things more during the day, and of course, you like to see the sights, some of the tourist things, if I come across them. But I'm pretty happy just kind of cruising down the streets and taking it all in that way. You really get to see the city, I think, better. So I don't take too many cabs. I don't take too many trains, unless I'm in New York. But even then, I still walk a lot. But it's just more about taking it in as it comes. And I like to leave a good opening for some adventure as well, because you never know who you're going to come across, and they might recommend something. I like to kind of veer off and go do that when you got that recommendation. It kind of keeps that sense of adventure, and I really like not knowing as well, what's going on. I think for me there's some sense of adventure in that, and it's fun not knowing what's going to happen walking out the door each day. And I typically like to live there primarily. If that's you're asking me what I do mostly with my
No,
time,
I
I
think
try to
that's
keep myself in that position. Is
no, I think
not knowing what's
that's
going to happen.
well,
I
because
like
a
that.
lot of people overplan. I think in general with
Yeah.
everything, with life, career. You go to school, you go to college, and you were told you got to get the standard job, work 9 to 5, work your way up, blah blah blah, 401k, this and like you hear all these things, buy a house, mortgage, kids, like all the things that are just
Yeah.
standard that we've been taught again and again and again. And people like you were kind of changing that a little bit, or not so much. I mean, for yourself. I mean, if other
Right.
people take inspiration or ideas from this, that's great. But more than that, you for yourself, you're like, hold up, there's a different path I want to go down. Right or wrong, it's mine. I'm going to experience this and see what happens.
Yeah.
Which I think is
That's
awesome.
That's
Um,
really what it comes down to. And you're right. I did a lot of the same things that so many people do with all those things you just lifted off. I did that, and for me, it didn't work. I think for some people, maybe it does, and that's great if it works for you. But that kind of way of living didn't work for me. I find much more, comfort and happiness in not knowing what's going to happen and kind of just letting go and trusting that whatever comes along, I'll deal with it when it gets there, and I'll know how to deal with it. As long as I just, kind of stay honest with myself in the situation, the stuff shakes out. To be honest, I've had a heck of a lot less problems and a lot more fun since then. So
well,
I
that's
kind of stick with that now. But it's nice too to be surrounded with people who do plan a little bit as well. I think my younger brother, looks up stuff a little bit more, different restaurants and things. So when he meets me somewhere and we travel together, he's got a nice list, and we go to those different places, and that's fun to go see the city with, other people. So I stay open to wherever that kind of
all
comes.
right.
So.
So, I've already been talking for about half an hour and change now, so I don't want to monopolize too much of your time. So, but just a couple of things I want to touch on real quick, and then we'll wrap it up. Maybe do this another time as well. But so I'm gonna hit bullet points in general, right? So battlingkitten.com is a site where people can go to and kind of share their creative
Hmm.
thoughts, ideas, whatever. And it's not a matter. I mean, to truly express their creativity, I guess is a better way to put
Right.
it. Whatever that may be. Um, Independent of that, and you guys should all check it out. I mean, it's coming along. It's doing its thing. Whatever. Since I've been talking to Zeke about this for the past couple of months, it's made strides and it's continued to do so as well. You also mentioned real quick, just because I don't want to forget about this itself. You were trying to do a documentary, or you're doing a documentary. Sorry. I don't know if you started filming. I don't know where you're on the process. I don't
Hmm.
know what the content is. Can you give us a quick overview of where you're at, what the purpose of the documentary is, and what you hope people can garner from it? Like, why do it?
Again, this is, more for inspiration, what people are going to end up taking from it, I don't know. And really, to be honest, isn't, as much of the concern as it is, enjoying the process that's going on. But what it is, I'm basically almost done with writing, the majority of it and how it's going to play out. It's all outlined. We're doing some test filming this week. I just got a new video camera, and we're starting to get through the kind of the testing phase right now to see what's going to work, and then we'll start filming at that point. So I'm hoping in the next 2 months we'll begin, all the filming through it. And essentially, what it's about is child trauma and what happens in the environment with kids when they're put into a difficult environment. What does that do to them, as adults? How does it shape, personalities? And when so much of your environment is governed essentially in more fear than it is love, or some kind of, abandonment, as in nobody's around much because maybe the parents are working, which is, called proximal abandonment. So it's when that doesn't happen and the mind starts to become, more stressed. And when these kind of stressful environments start to happen, you start to, produce these, kind of false images, if you will, to gain some kind of agreement with your environment. So, for example, if you have a very abusive parent, you're going to start to learn ways to, not get in trouble, essentially. And that may not always be true to how you're feeling. A lot of times you'll suppress, feelings and things. So, you start to create these, false images and these agreements, out of this, fear. And essentially that, separating kind of the mind and the spirit, what you really want and, really what you're thinking in order to survive, And then once you get to that, it starts to create a lot of, emotional blindness, lack of altruism, inempathy, greed, jealousy, all these different things that end up causing a lot of problems, in
So
the
you're
world and
trying
how
to
you
film
process
kids who are
information.
dealing with this right now, or you're trying to film people who are trying to help the kids, or both?
What we're going to do is examine how that process generally plays out. Why by talking with neurobiologists addressing the science side, psychologists as well, and people who work in child trauma, people who work in addiction, and discussing the common threads that they see, and how these kind of things develop. So the point is not to actually give anybody answers on necessarily how to cure all these things, because it's everybody's an individual. So the biggest thing is trying to lay out a some groundwork for this is how some of these things develop. This addiction, narcissism, and other types of personalities that are in that realm that come from a difficult environment, and from there discuss the have these people discuss how it unfolds, so you can then go back and kind of take a look at your own life and start to plant the seeds for how can I kind of get back to who I originally am, because that's where it gets lost. Your original self gets, or your authentic self gets lost in all of this trauma. So it's outlining all of that
And this is
through
all
various professionals in an interview or documentary format, and then by the time we get, to the end, it's about really raising a lot of important questions, and addressing concepts like blame, denial, or other inhibitors that, kind of stop you from, moving forward or even being honest with yourself, really. So it's just about getting there to answer some really important questions, because if you can't really find yourself and be honest with yourself, it's next to impossible to be honest with what you're seeing with the rest of the world,
And this is all being done in the U.S. as far as the filming stuff goes,
I
or
would say mainly, yeah. Additionally, I was going to go to other parts of the world, and I've talked to other people who work in these, fields, whether it's neurobiology or psychology, and different education systems and stuff. I've talked to in other countries, but I've found that I can cover the majority of it here. Because even through all my travels, it seems like regardless of culture, a lot of this stuff manifests itself from the same place. And so I think wherever I can tell the story just as well here as I can anywhere else, and so it'll mostly be shot, here and actually in New York as well.
cool.
Mhm.
Final question, I believe.
Mhm.
Um, Trial psychology. Why kids are or why people are the way they are by way of maybe a less than quote unquote stellar or standard or TV show childhood.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Um, are you from that kind of background, or do you know people in that background that got you to it? Like, or was it somebody you dated or somebody you crossed paths with? Like, why the interest in this particular subject matter?
Because for me, it's trying to understand the personalities that that lead to having addiction, and not just to substance, but to power, to shopping, could be any kind of um, addiction, or different type of personalities too, that what creates somebody to not be quite as social, because we're humans are social by nature, and when you go through certain events that start to put you to a place to where you really retreat back from the world, what's occurred during that time, to make that happen. So from there, it's just lining up with people who study and do these things, and then having them lay out these different processes on how it happens, not just for my own understanding, but from for other people who were interested in finding kind of their way back to their authentic self, if you will. Because not everybody can afford to go to therapy. I mean, I never could.
Yeah, I've never done it either. Thought about it,
Yeah,
never done it either.
yeah, I've certainly considered it, but I mean, I couldn't afford it. I don't
Yeah,
know many people who can. And what about people that are working all the time that can't even afford to research these subjects? But for me, it's about putting it out there in the world so that discussion can be had about these subjects. So people much smarter than myself can continue to evolve on these concepts, and it keeps the discussion alive. I think that's the biggest thing. So it's just something that inspires me right now to work on. It helps me personally stay centered and continue to learn more about these things. And I'm just going to put it out in the world. I think it's going to go where it's going to go, and having these discussions about these subjects with different people has really helped as well, because it really relates to everything. It takes a certain type of personality to send people to war, but you not go out there yourself. You pretty much have people doing things for you, or who people who condone this class warfare or hyper consumerism, and all these economic disparities. To be able to see and live with these things and actually be okay with it. What kind of personalities that take to get to that point. And the most recent example, I think everybody's on everybody's mind now, is all these politicians. How can you get to the point where you're actually believing in this stuff that you're saying, and actually act this way despite it affecting so many people around the world, especially America, because the reach is so far. you know um, how do you get to that type of personality? What happens along the way? And of course, it's not just one event. It's different for everybody. Everybody's unique, but there are some underlining, some basic core things that typically happen to produce those personalities. And that's what we're trying to get to, is the core of where everything starts, and where does it start to go wrong, and
Yeah.
address those things.
Wow. You got a lot going on.
Yeah,
Appreciate the
big
time in
subject.
general. So as I mentioned earlier, Zeke is working on. He's got the battlekitten.org. Please go and check it out, and see what he's doing, what he's about itself. The documentary is in process as far as on the creative side. So eventually that'll start going as well, and I'll keep you guys posted on when that'll get done. I'll probably have Zeke back on to talk about what his experience has brought forth to him or otherwise. And we'll bring you some more of the travels along the way and see if there's anything cool that pops up. The whole point of this conversation as well is to be as informal as possible. Hopefully, this was informal yet informative. You've now met somebody else who's kind of doing things to help versus just take from the world, and doing it in a cool way. So, hope you found this interesting. Zeke, much love. Thanks for doing this.
Appreciate it. Appreciate you
And
having me on.
guys, we'll do this another time, and hopefully, be more of these to come. Talk soon.